this morning I'm going to be talking about a song that most of you in the congregation will know, which is The Heart of Worship by Matt Redman. So I'm going to split it into three sections, this talk. So firstly I'm going to talk about why I actually chose the song. Then we're going to go into the lyrics themselves, the meaning behind them, and then also we'll be taking a look into 1 Chronicles. I know Old Testament, we don't do a lot of that around here, but there we go. And actually going into the verses, then the pre-chorus, then the chorus, and what the words actually mean. And then finally we're going to be ending by looking at our worship team. So I'll start with, as I say, why I chose this song. So I'll briefly go into the story of why the song was written. A lot of you will know, as you're a lot of people in here are from Watford, and it was written at Soul Survivor Watford. It's a reasonably well-known story in Christian circles. So Matt Redman, at the time of writing back in the 90s, he and the leadership team at Soul Survivor felt that they'd lost something of the heart of worship in their actual physical worship as a church. Anyone who's been to sort of a big summer festival, something like New Day, also the Soul Survivor festivals as well, will know that there's a big sort of pomp and circumstance around the worship. It's a wonderful production, and that is, it's certainly not a bad thing in itself. But what Matt Redman and the team at Soul Survivor had felt was that something of the heart of the Holy Spirit in worship had been lost. And so they took time away from doing that. They stopped the big production. They stopped doing sort of loud sung worship during the services at Soul Survivor for a period of months. And it was in that time that Matt Redman wrote this song. And so why that was quite poignant for me and why I then ended up choosing this song to talk about this morning is from my own personal experience. So I became a Christian when I was 16, and I started leading worship when I was 17. And so I led worship for maybe 9 months or so before going off to university. And it was a huge blessing. I also had the opportunity to go out to Uganda before I went to university, and I led worship out there. And if you want to see the heart of worship, let me tell you, that is the place to go. No, it was a building which didn't even have any windows or sort of functioning doors, certainly no electricity in there. But my word, they made quite the noise. And that was real worship with the heart of the Holy Spirit. But then when I went to university, I found, as a lot of young people do, I gave into a lot of the vices and the temptations of being away from home, not having rules, not having parents to sort of govern what I was doing and govern my 10:30 bedtime. I still have a 10:30 bedtime. And so in that time, I then felt I wasn't worthy to lead a congregation in worship. I was still part of the Christian Union, and I'd sort of almost guest appear whenever it was my time on the rota to lead worship. I'd then go along, I'd get my guitar. And to be honest, what worship became for me was I was the big man at the front with the guitar, looking pretty cool, a lot of Christian ladies around, and that's what worship became for me. But then I had a realization, if that's the attitude I've got towards worship, what right do I have to try and lead other people to get to that place? Because the job of a team leading worship is to facilitate the congregation and the family of God into that place of worship. And I knew that I couldn't do that at that stage. So I took a couple of years where I didn't lead worship at all. I didn't really play guitar at all. I didn't really do anything musical for a few years. And to be honest, it affected me quite deeply because it was something that God blessed me to do. He told me to do to start leading worship. But I knew that at that time I couldn't do that. And it wasn't until I then moved to Watford 3 or 4 years later that I then came to a place where I truly knew that I believed what I was doing. I was worshipping with the Holy Spirit, and therefore I could then start doing it again. And that, in a nutshell, is why I wanted to speak about this song, because it was very poignant for me at the time that this was a song that really led me back to that place of truly worshipping, wanting to explore the heart of God, and actually worshipping truly with the Holy Spirit. So now I'll move on to start talking about the lyrics of the song itself. So I'm going to read out the verses, both verse 1 and 2. When the music fades, all is stripped away, and I simply come, longing just to bring something that's of worth that will bless your heart. And then verse 2, King of endless worth, no one could express how much you deserve. Though I'm weak and poor, all I have is yours, every single breath. So we're going to go take a little bit of a deeper dive into some of the phrases and some of the sentences in there. And to do that, we're going to use 1 Chronicles. So we're going to go into 1 Chronicles 16, verse 8 to 11 for this part. Give praise to the Lord. Proclaim his name. Make known among the nations what he has done. Sing to him. Sing praise to him. Tell of all his wonderful acts. Glory in his holy name. Let the hearts of those who seek the Lord rejoice. Look to the Lord and his strength. Seek his face always. So the verses of the song, The Heart of Worship, really focus on wanting to please God. Talking to God on, the best way I could describe it, was sort of a human level. And sort of giving a small appreciation for what God has done. So sentences like, longing just to bring something that's of worth that will bless your heart. And King of endless worth, no one could express how much you deserve. So that naturally led me to a couple of questions, which were, how will we bless God's heart? And how do we express how much he deserves? And I think there are a few guidelines in 1 Chronicles to this. So just to give you a brief bit of context to the passage that we've just read, and the passage that is later to come as well. This is during the reign of King David, and he appoints some of the Levites to minister to the Lord before the Ark of the Covenant. So they take instruments, and the sentences we've just read are exactly what David says to them to instruct them how to give praise and worship. So firstly, I wanted to look at proclaim his name, make known among the nations what he has done. And so to put that into layman's terms, you need to tell people. That in itself is worship. Tell people who don't know, and then people who do know who maybe need to know a little bit more. That in itself is worship. Number 2, sing praise to him. Tell of all his wonderful acts. Rather than now saying it to somebody else, say it directly to the Lord. Show that we recognize and appreciate what he's done for us. And seek his face always. Now this one was a bit of a strange one because I think physically that's probably the easiest out of all of those. You don't actually have to open your mouth necessarily to do it. You don't have to talk to anybody or sort of have any awkward feeling. You can do it in your own time. But actually, whilst it might be the easiest action, it's often the hardest to do if we don't prioritize it. And now I want to focus on the pre-choruses of the song. I'll move on. So I'll read out the pre-choruses, they're both the same. I'll bring you more than a song, for a song in itself is not what you have required. You search much deeper within, through the way things appear, you're looking into my heart. Now one particular line in there stood out, something I wanted to get into a bit more, which was a song in itself is not what you have required. And again, that strikes a poignant question of, so what does God require from us in worship? If we strip back all of the music and all of the nice sounds, the production, the laser show. And some of the answers, again, can be found in 1 Chronicles 16, this time looking at verses 25 to 30. For great is the Lord, and most worthy of praise. He is to be feared above all gods. For all the gods of the nations are idols, but the Lord made the heavens. Splendor and majesty and joy are in his dwelling place. Ascribe to the Lord, all you families of nations. Ascribe to the Lord glory and strength. Ascribe to the Lord the glory due his name. Bring an offering and come before him. Worship the Lord in the splendor of his holiness. Tremble before him all the earth. The world is firmly established. It cannot be moved. So again, we're going to look at three different elements of that. So firstly, ascribe to the Lord the glory due his name. Again, just tell him. It doesn't have to sound good, it doesn't have to look pretty, as long as you are recognizing what God has done and telling him. And then secondly, bring an offering and come before him. An offering can be many things. It can be money, it can be time. In the Old Testament, it was a whole raft of different things. But as long as it's sacrificial in some way to us, that is something of value to the Lord, no matter how small that might be. And finally, tremble before him, all the earth. Now, this can be literal. Feel free to crack on with trembling during the time of worship, that's fine. But ultimately, it means be reverent and be humble before God. And now finally, going to move on to the chorus. I'm coming back to the heart of worship, and it's all about you. It's all about you, Jesus. I'm sorry, Lord, for the thing I've made it. When it's all about you, it's all about you, Jesus. Now, to be honest, the chorus is fairly self-explanatory. It covers the themes of the song. it covers sort of the reason I chose this song in the I'm sorry, Lord, for the thing I've made it. That was definitely a conversation I had with God. But what I really did notice about it was that it's this, and through the whole song, we're talking directly to God through this song. We're literally, he could be standing right in front of us, and it would work as a sort of conversation. And this isn't the case with all worship songs. Spoiler, but when the song that Erica's going to be covering, the verses actually talk about God to the congregation, and then goes the choruses in the bridge then actually go into then speaking directly to God and thanking God for what he's done. And this then led me to thinking, as we come on to the last part, about our worship team here and how we actually prepare for a Sunday of worship. Obviously Mondays are good for worship as well. And that's something that we really do take into account when we're preparing songs for a Sunday morning, is we try to make sure that the songs do have a combination of that we are talking to the Lord, directly thanking him for something, that we're talking about the Lord, and that also we're talking to the church family as a whole. So yeah, we always try and make sure that all of that is included. But what that then sort of brought me on to thinking about was what our time of preparation for a Sunday morning has become. And I think this has been, and I'm sure a lot of the guys in the worship team will sort of feel the same way, over the last maybe year and a half, there's been a real appetite for worshipping during practice. It's not just a situation of, let's get in there, let's get everything done nice and efficiently, and out we go, we want to get to bed. It's on a Thursday evening, we go to the Smith's house, and that's where we practice. And actually, there's nobody there other than us. The Smiths are, doing whatever they're doing in their house. And but there is no element of performance to what we do on a Thursday. Yet, it has become such a time of intimate worship as a group that is the heart of worship in there. There is no one else. There isn't a light show. There isn't anything else. There's only the 6 of us in the room. I was trying to think of the word for this sort of last section. I didn't know whether it maybe was reassurance or maybe insight into how we prepare for things on a Sunday morning. But do feel reassured that before we come before you guys on a Sunday morning, that is how we prepare. The first step is prayer and worship together. And that makes it such a privilege and a blessing to be able to stand here and firstly talk, but also lead a team in worship. So that's sort of where I'm going to close, but I'm going to close with a request really for us as a worship team. We want to continue to grow as a worship team. We want to make sure we're in that place where we're focusing on the heart of worship before we bring it to the congregation to try and facilitate for everybody else. So do pray that we never think of worship as a performance, because that's quite difficult to do when you stood up here with a microphone and these funky lights that we've now got going behind us and these ones right in your face up there. So yeah, do pray that we never think of it like that. And yeah, I think that's where I'm going to end actually.